Happy New Year, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about, continue on this holiday season type thing for this one. We're going to talk about why Jesus talked in parables and why he was a carpenter. And we're going to base these types of things on data. So we're going to show how data, you can search for different types of data in order to talk about a hypothesis. In this case, we're going to talk about Jesus. So, and the next data show, we'll talk about taxes, which will be interesting. Give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, right? So we're gonna do that. That's going to be the next data show. This data show is going to be data and profession. Why was Jesus a carpenter, and why did he speak in parables? On this, the data show. Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Greco, your host for the Data Show. I hope you had a Merry Christmas. I hope you had a great New Year. And it all depends, I guess, when they're gonna publish this video. But what we'd like to talk about today, and I think this is important to state the obvious, right, is that there's data, and a lot of people think that data has to do with numbers and charts and all the other things have to go to Excel and Power BI and Python and all these different things. And really, data is information. That's really what data is. And we get the information from wherever we can get it, type of aspect. So what I want to talk about today is, the first part is, I was just coming upon it, is, why do we talk about when Jesus seems to always talk about parables, right? He always talks about stories. Well, I think it's interesting that history, that if you cut that right about where the I is, between the I and the S, it's called high story, high story. So basically what happens is you have the history of things in stories, hence story is a big part of history. And I think that I thought, why is this guy always talking about in parables? Why does he talk about stories? Why can't he just state straight out what happens? And I think, and I was in church, and there was the reading about Matthew. And Matthew was talking, the disciples were saying, hey, why are you talking in parables? Why do you do this? And he says that I understand how things are. You understand how things are, but there's people that don't understand it. I must tell them the story so that they can understand. I must do it in a way that people can understand it. Otherwise, it goes over their heads, and that's pretty much it. And I thought, come on, yes, we're talking about Jesus' time, but cut me a break. Are you talking about that people were that, uneducated from that standpoint? Yes, they were. I mean, these were people that had professions, as a carpenter, as something, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. So I looked up, when we talk about reading, right? We talk about, reading and writing at the time of Jesus. Well, Jesus used to read from Isaiah, which is interesting because Isaiah, in his prophecy, stated that basically Messiah was going to go from Nazareth to Capernaum, or move, to Capernaum, which is what he did later on. Jesus did. But interestingly enough, it's, the Bible's available now, it was all those types of things. But basically what was happening was people were spreading the word by word of mouth. And I think we've lost that. I think, the word of mouth, and we talk about it, we don't even say the word of mouth as much anymore, right? We just don't do it. So word of mouth is very, very important, especially in biblical times, because when we talk about history, we talk about those types of stories that are coming out from people, we also have to take into consideration that those stories were a lot of word of mouth. And that's exactly what we're talking about when we talk about word of mouth. So that's why Jesus spoke a lot in parables, and that's why those types of things happen. But this took some, I just did some research on this because it was really important to me to understand why is it that the guy was always talking about that? And this Alan Millard talked about it, and this is what he said. Since every copy was made by hand, of the Bible, books were not cheap, although we should not exaggerate their cost. A copy of a lengthy book like Isaiah might take a professional scribe 3 days or so to make. So the price would be his wages and the cost of materials. So not many individual Jews owned those types of things. They didn't own books. It was, we take books really for granted here. But at that point in time, we talk about reading and writing, and it was very rare that people actually were able to read and write because there wasn't much reading to do. I mean, that's the way it was. So people were into service type professions, farmers, fishermen, carpenters, all these things that masons, all these things that had to go along with how to make a community, how to do those things. So then I thought, okay, well, that's pretty cool how that was. So then I talked about, I don't understand, why did Jesus, so that's the first part of that. And that was just a quick introduction, as to research aspects. Again, data, right? You're trying to gather data from different sources. Why did Jesus move from Nazareth to Capernaum? Well, he said it because he did it for a number of reasons. One is because people in Nazareth weren't really appreciating his topics of conversation. And also he had read Isaiah, which said, you're going to move away from Nazareth. So he decides that he's rejected in Nazareth. Herod was still after him, right? King Herod he had already killed John the Baptist, so he was after him. So he says, I'm out of here. Now, let's take a look at it from the carpentry point of view. And I was just thinking about this from a data point of view, right? I'm trying to stick with data. Why Jesus, as a carpenter, would move from Nazareth to Capernaum, right? Nazareth wasn't much fishing done. Capernaum, that's a lot of fishing was done there because it literally was on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, the northern shore of the Sea of Galilee. So why would a carpenter do that? Why would a carpenter? And so I thought, why? What is important? What is important for a carpenter to do in Capernaum? I mean, a guy's he's got to work somewhere along the line because that's what he did. And I thought, okay, this is what it was. The symbolism of carpentry, they talk about the symbolism of carpentry and how it's, a builder of lives, the foundation of all the things that have to go along with that. And I get that. That's very philosophical, but I'm talking about data, right? What's data? What data do we have? Well, what do they use to fish? They use boats. That's what they use to fish. I mean, boats, right? So if they use boats, what are boats made out of? Boats are made out of wood, right? I mean, it is very, very important to understand that this is what we're talking about. So boats are made out of wood. Boats are made out of wood. What does a carpenter do? A carpenter deals with wood. So he would have a profession that he could take with him to Capernaum to be able to do those things that would help the fishermen fish. He could help repair the boats. He could help build the boats. He could do those types of things. And it was wood was hard to come by. So he had to take different types of wood and put that in. And how did I know that? Well, because you see, is it this one? I think it's so. These are different areas, but I wanted to point out about the boat here, and I think this is important. That the boat, let's see, said so there was a boat found, because of a drought in 1980, and they call it Jesus' boat, but this is a drought. Here we go. Although there's no evidence Jesus' disciples ever sailed in Crete. The intact hull was found buried in mud about 5 miles south of Capernaum, near the town of Magdala, the home of Mary Magdalene, right? The boat has since been conserved and preserved and is now on display at this center in the kibbutz, right? Careful study of the boat reveals just how resourceful Galilee's shipwrights had to be. Suitable timber was hard to come by, so the Galilee boat was cobbled together of various kinds of wood stripped from older boats and was repeatedly repaired. When it was no longer seaworthy, for few remaining usable timbers and all the nails were removed, the worn-out hull was abandoned to the mud. And it's really interesting how, you sit back and you go, okay, so he was useful. He was a useful individual in Capernaum to help the boatsmen, to help the shipwrights or whatever it was. Even though there's nothing said about that, I wonder if he didn't use that to be able to gain a foothold and understand how people were, so that he could then understand the culture with which the fishermen were there. And that's the type of thing that data does. Data gives you the ability to research in general gives you that ability, but research is data. Research is information. This is what data is. And it really amazes me how people have forgotten how to do that. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about, and I'm focusing on Jesus, and I'm focusing on that because there's so many questions, and there's a lot of possible answers out there. I'm not saying that it's the correct answer or it's the only answer, but I'm saying there's more to it than meets the eye, and there's more to what happened in the Bible than just this happened and this happened and this happened, this happened. And yes, I understand faith and all that, but the bottom line is this: is the data can help you to make sense out of the non sequiturs that exist out there. And you can sit back and say, okay, it helps me to understand the culture of the individuals that were out there. And this is a really good article. This is a great article. The Biblical Archaeological Society Library. So, I mean, it's a good article, and you can go from there. So that's what we're talking about with that. And then, the Gospels say about Jesus' profession, different aspects, and it's interesting also to note that as a carpenter, and this is something that's really interesting, is that the carpenter was somebody that you could depend upon to help you fix things, to help you build things. And that was really cool. But also in the long-term aspect, a carpenter could see, could see something. They could see the idea behind it, the building and all those things. So I think that's important to understand that. And this is going to be a quick data show. I mean, I don't know. I'm hoping that everyone that's watching the show can sit back and say, okay, that I'm trying not to make it about religion. I'm trying to make it about the Bible. I'm trying to make that the Bible is data, and the data comes from other data. Really, is what it comes about to, and it's very important. And this is my interpretation only. My interpretation is my opinion, and so I don't want you to sit back. I have no divinity degree. I have no. I'm not a pastor. I'm nothing like that. I am a data guy. So my research and the way I do things, I'm trying to get a point of view that this is what the data shows. And the data, it's interesting, is also opinionated. So it's opinionated data coming in, but you put all that together. When I was in intelligence, we used to say, you try to get 3 sources to get the same thing. If you get 3 sources to get the same thing, it pretty much is a fact. So those are the things that I'm trying to do with the data aspects and how I'm trying to work it. So again, this is going to be a short and sweet data show, but I just wanted to put that out there for you, and to help you understand a little bit, and to allow you to go out there and do those things. And so the 2 topics we discovered we talked about today were the history aspect, story and history, and that in the Bible there's a lot of parables, and those parables were said in a way that people could understand it. Jesus talking about people burning in the fires of Gehenna, and it was just basically a trash dump that was always burning. So I mean, it's people could understand that. the different parable aspects, very, very important, and the story aspects. And the idea that Jesus was a carpenter and understood foundations and building and took his trade from Nazareth to Capernaum, where there was a fishing village, a fishing area, and probably, and there's nothing in here to state that as a fact, but if he was a carpenter and even helped fix or repair or helped to build or repair a ship, that made his trade very, very important to the fishermen. And that helped the fishermen go out and catch fish. And if he could make that story like, I'm a carpenter and I believe in foundations and I believe in building a foundation, I need you to be fishers of men. All these things are interestingly interconnected. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say. And thank you so much for watching the Data Show. And remember, always check the data, very important, and understand where the data is coming from. And the opinions that are expressed in that data, very important. But the next time on the Data Show, we'll be talking about taxes, because it's going to be tax season. It's January now, and it's going to kick into February, and then people are going to start getting ready for taxes. And I think you need to understand what about U.S. government revenue, what it does, what off budget, on budget, all these different things that go about there. And we'll talk about revenues, we'll talk about population density, those types of things in the next Data Show. And thank you so much for watching. Please take care of yourself this new year. And if you have any resolutions, hopefully one of those resolutions is that you're going to learn more about how to collect data so that you too can form a hypothesis and try to either reject or not reject that hypothesis. Until next time, this is Chris Greco. Thank you for watching the Data Show. Take care.